Welcome to the book of Amos. Man, I got mad respect for this guy. He wasn't a professional prophet like Isaiah. He wasn't a priest or a Levite. He's just this ordinary shepherd with a tight relationship with Yahweh. The book opens the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel during the reigns of Uzziah, king of Judah, and Jeroboam, king of Israel. Now, another cool thing about Amos is he was the very first of the writing prophets. Now, sure, Elijah and Elisha predate him, but Amos comes before Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, Joel, Obadiah, all the minor prophets. Take a look at where we can find Amos on a timeline with me. So here is this massive timeline. This is a list of the kings of Judah in red and blue. This is a list of the kings of Israel. Now, where is Amos? Here he is. Now, he prophesied during the reigns of Uzziah, king of Judah, and Jeroboam, king of Israel. Now, this was a time of prosperity because Assyria was kind of on its way down. This period during Uzziah and Jeroboam's reign was right between two really strong Assyrian kings. There's Shalmaneser the fifth and Tiglath-Pileser the third. But between those two guys, Assyria is kind of weak and not really influential in the area of Israel and Judah. And therefore, these guys can expand their territory and reclaim a lot of the land that they had lost. Take a look at this map. So this is Israel and Judah during the reigns of Jeroboam and Uzziah. And notice how Jeroboam recaptured all of this land in yellow, and Uzziah pushed all the way down to the Gulf of Aqaba. This is almost the same extent as was enjoyed under the reigns of David and Solomon. So pretty amazing. So our buddy Amos, he prophesied while Uzziah was on the throne, but he did not prophesy to Uzziah, king of Judah. No, this little shepherd from Tekoa, there he is, shepherd from Tekoa, he's going to cross over from Judah into Israel and prophesy in Bethel. Now, I really like this little drawing that was made by the Bible Project. Here's their little poster for the book of Amos. I think that this picture really captures the geography and just the opulence and the wealth and the corruption of that time. So here's Amos, pops over from Tekoa over to Bethel, where he prophesies. Now, he hopped over into Israel, but he didn't stay long. Look at the opening line here in the book of Amos again. Here's the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah and Jeroboam. Look at this, 2 years before the earthquake. Now that's interesting. This earthquake is mentioned in Zechariah 14:5 as well. Now, we don't know precisely when this earthquake took place, but it does tell us that the ministry of Amos was very short. It had to be short enough to be associated with this specific event in history. I mean, if Amos prophesied over decades, why would you say that his ministry, these words of Amos, he saw before this single earthquake, which took place during this 1 year? So most likely, Amos is going to go over to Bethel and prophesy against Israel for probably less than a year, most likely. Well, Amos, it seems likely that he probably didn't leave Israel and leave Bethel of his own volition. He was probably kicked out of the northern kingdom. You see, chapters 7 through 9 record 5 visions which Amos sees back to back. But these visions are interrupted by the only narrative in the entire book, here in chapter 7, verses 10 to 17. Let's take a look at that narrative there in chapter 7. Let's jump down to chapter 7, verse 10. So our buddy Amos is in Bethel. And the priest of Bethel, he's going to talk to the king of Israel, Jeroboam, and he's going to say, man, we got to get rid of this guy. He's driving us crazy with all of his condemnations and accusations against us. So Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, now remember Bethel is where Jeroboam the first put one of the golden calves, these rival worship centers in the north. So Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, says to Amos, "Go, flee away to the land of Judah. Go back home, prophesy there, but never again prophesy in Bethel." Now, Amos is going to respond to Amaziah, this wicked priest of Bethel. "I was no prophet. I'm no professional prophet. I'm a herdsman. I take care of the sheep. I'm a dresser of sycamore figs. But Yahweh took me from following the flock." This is the exact same phrase that's used to speak of David as well. The Lord took David from following the flock, so that's very interesting. "And he said to me, go, prophesy to my people Israel, and say to them," well, first off, "you yourself, Amaziah, priest of Bethel, you yourself will die in an unclean land, and Israel, the north, will surely go into exile." Now this is the message of Amos. Israel, repent or face exile. And, as we know, Israel did not listen to this message. They rejected it. But they didn't reject Amos, not at first. At first, they loved this guy, Amos. So the book of Amos begins with 2 chapters of oracles against the nations. We're becoming familiar with those by now. So Yahweh is going to command Amos to go north. So Amos marches north, crosses over the border to Bethel, and he starts denouncing all of Israel's neighbors, 7 of them. He says, "Syria, you smell stinky. You're going to be destroyed. Philistia, you're going to get punched in the face. Tyre, you're going to break your toe." He denounces all of the neighbors of Israel. And the Israelites, the north, they love it at this point. Amos, shepherd from Judah, even denounces Judah itself. And of course, everyone agrees with him completely. They're like, "Ha, Judah, you're so self-righteous. We have the temple in Jerusalem. The temple in Jerusalem. It's going to be destroyed." Well, these accusations that Amos levels against these 7 surrounding nations of Israel, they all follow the same pattern. Amos, he loves patterns, and that's why I kind of love him as well. So these accusations take the form of, "For 3 transgressions of Syria, and for 4, I will not revoke punishment, because," and then they list the crimes of these nations. Usually it's just a couple of lines. And then it says, "Therefore, or so, I will send fire upon them, and I will devour her strongholds." That same exact pattern repeated 7 times. And at this point, I'm sure everyone in Bethel is just rolling on the floor laughing. But then Amos clears his throat. He says, "For 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not revoke punishment, but I will surely punish the nation of Israel." And everyone's like, "Huh? How could you say this, Amos? We are amazing. We're in a golden age right now. We're not going to see destruction." And this oracle against Israel, it's not teeny tiny like these first 7 ones. All of these oracles are just, 2, maybe 3 verses long. This is 4 times as long, his accusation and condemnation of Israel. And it seems as if this first section, its whole purpose and function within the book is simply to draw a target on a map with Israel right at the center. Let me show you that map again. So these oracles against the nations, they are simply drawing a target with Israel at its center. So the wonderful Holman Bible Atlas, they've identified each of these oracles against the nations. So the first one is against Syria, and then one against Philistia, and then up against Tyre, and then down against Edom, and then Ammon, and then Moab, and then Judah here. And what's it doing but simply drawing a target on a map with Israel at the center? That's what I'm shooting at right there. Well, the sins that Amos condemns here in this oracle against the nations, they're going to be repeated throughout the entire book. So they warrant us taking a slightly closer look at these sins of Israel in the north. How would we categorize these sins of Israel? Let's jump to chapter 2. For 3 transgressions of Moab and of Judah and of Israel, I will not revoke punishment. Why? Because they sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. This is debt slavery we're talking about, exploitation of the poor by the rich. They trample on the head of the poor and they turn aside the way of the afflicted. So what are we talking about here? This is injustice. Amos is going to condemn Israel in the north for their lack of justice. So that's sin number 1. The big sin number 2 of Israel is idolatry. What do? They lay themselves down beside every altar. Israel in the north, they've got altars everywhere. They've got one in Dan, one in Bethel, one in Gilgal, Samaria, Beersheba. We'll worship any god anywhere. Now let's take a look at a catalog of all of the sins of Israel. Here it is right here, the sins of Israel as condemned by Amos. Now the 2 biggies, which we just identified, are injustice and idolatry. Let's kind of zoom through a couple of these to give you a taste of what Amos condemns. So the poor are oppressed, and the rich, while they've got houses everywhere, they've got a winter house, they've got a summer house, their houses are made of ivory, they've got great houses, and their wives, Amos calls, this is pretty comical, he calls them cows of Bashan who just love to drink. And in all of their luxury and their wealth and their opulence, they abandon the poor, they oppress the poor, crush the needy. These phrases, you'll see them again and again and again. Here we are again in chapter 5. They trample the poor while they themselves live in these really fancy houses and have these wonderful vineyards. They afflict the righteous, turn aside the needy. While they're lying on beds of ivory and stretching themselves out on comfy couches, and they're singing songs, and they're inventing these new musical instruments because they have so much time on their hands. And all the while, they're trampling the needy, there's that phrase again, and bringing the poor to an end. So sin number 1. Sin number 2, you remember, is idolatry, worshiping the golden calves in Dan and Bethel. So we saw here in chapter 2, they lay themselves down beside every altar, and those altars are condemned again in chapter 3. The altars of Bethel, the horns of the altar will be cut off, but not just in Bethel, also in Gilgal and Beersheba. And for this, you will go into exile, and you'll bring your images with you into exile, Amos says. The guilt of Samaria is, of course, the golden calf there in Dan as well. And Yahweh, here in the final vision in chapter 9, he will destroy the altar and the temple and bring it to an end and scatter its rocks all over the worshipers. Well, Amos concludes, after his initial condemnation of Israel, that the nation cannot and they will not escape judgment. The swift, those who can run really, really fast, they're not going to be able to run fast enough to escape judgment. And the strong, they will not be able to save themselves. And they didn't. Amos, he probably preached sometime in the 760s. Well, 40 years after the ministry of Amos, Assyria is going to sweep into the nation and destroy all of its luxurious cities and bring its idolatrous temple to the ground and then exile its people. Well, this judgment began here in chapter 2 is going to continue for 6 more chapters all the way to the beginning of chapter 9. But at least these oracles of judgment have a compelling design. First, we have 3 announcement oracles in chapters 3, 4, and 5. And each of these is going to begin with the same phrase, hear the word of the Lord, hear the word of the Lord, hear the word of the Lord. And then we're going to have 2 woe oracles. in chapters 5 and 6. Woe to you, cows of Bashan! Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. And then finally, in chapters 7 to 9, we have 5 visions, each of which open with a phrase like, this is what Yahweh, the God of hosts, showed me. And then some vision of locusts and of a fire and of a plumb line. Well, at the very end, Amos is going to give us just a few lines of restoration hope. And we're going to save those lines for lecture 3 as our reward for getting through all of these chapters of judgment, which we will turn to next.